Hello there, welcome. In this video we're going to take a look at Google's latest cloud-based integrated development environment, Project IDX. We'll explore its core functionalities and what features it has to offer. Along the way, we'll get to experience some advantages as well as potential drawbacks in using the IDE. And finally, since there's a 70% chance that you are using VSCode as your primary editor, we'll get to experience firsthand how it compares to Visual Studio Code. This is the part where I say, before we get started, take a moment to give this video a like and subscribe to support the channel. But I'm not going to say any of that, so let's get started right away. Alright, so before we configure a fresh workspace, here is a sample template Next.js workspace. Everything is already configured for us, and as you can see, everything is working very well as expected. The layout of this IDE is 100% similar to that of VSCode. If you've used VSCode, you can tell that simply by looking at it. So nothing really different on the layout, although there are some extras in here which we'll cover later in the video. You have your sidebar, workspace, and preview sections. On the sidebar you have your typical Explorer, Search, Source Control, Run and Debug. The only difference on the sidebar is this IDX menu, which we'll cover later in the video. Okay, now let's create and configure a blank workspace. Head over to their site to create your account if you don't already have. After setting up your IDX account, you'll be brought to your dashboard. This section will list all the workspaces you create. Unfortunately, there's a limit to the number of workspaces you can create. There's a solution for it, but more on that later. If you haven't created any workspace yet, this section will be empty. Here on the dashboard, you can create a workspace using one of the framework templates, or you can import from GitHub. If your preferred framework is not included in this initial list, click on this See All Templates link, and here you'll most likely find your preferred framework template. You have these category options to select a template from. If your preferred framework is still not in any of these categories, then unfortunately you can't use Project IDX.
What?
Just kidding, if your preferred framework isn't here, for instance I don't see Redwood, Alpine, Lit, and many more others here, it just means there's no template for your framework yet, but you can easily configure a blank workspace to whatever framework environment you prefer. To show you how, I'm going to create a blank workspace by going over to the miscellaneous category and selecting blank workspace. For those interested, you can come here to create a React app with Google Maps integration, just so you know. Let's give the workspace a name. P.S. I spent more than 10 minutes trying to name the workspace. Now we wait for the blank workspace to be created. Okay, the workspace has been created with almost no files. We just have a README Markdown file and the Nix configuration file. IDX uses Nix as its package manager to configure and manage all the dependencies of a workspace. If you're familiar with the main concept of Docker, that's the same with Nix, to prevent but it works on my computer problem. You can think of Nix as the package JSON file in a web app. We'll explore more about Nix in the next chapter of the video. By default, Node and NPM are configured in every workspace, and it makes sense because even if you prefer Yarn or Bun over NPM, you're still going to need to run a command with NPM to install it, and to get NPM you need Node. Like I said earlier, we'll learn more about Nix in the next chapter, but for now, let's build a simple app in here. The process is the same here as on any other IDE or editor. Create an HTML file, write a few lines of random characters and weird symbols in it. Oh wait, how are we going to run this file? Live server. Open the extensions menu on the sidebar, search for live server. No, not this one, even if it literally says here that it is a better live server with instant whatever. Okay, yes, this one. Install it. Now we can serve this HTML either by right-clicking the file in the Explorer, or right-clicking in the workspace, but to be a real dev you need to master shortcuts, so that's what we're going to use instead. Okay, the app is running. Now, let's add more content.
Yeah, boy.
The app is looking pretty sick already, but let's add some styles. Nice. Time for the final touch. Head over to Unsplash and grab any image URL, and paste it in the image href. This is looking great, but what if you had a local image which you'd like to use instead? Simply drag and drop it into the Explorer, update the image href, and that's it. Good job creating this wonderful web app. Okay, but this is just plain HTML. My preferred framework isn't included in the dashboard templates. No worries, open the terminal and run the command to initialize your project. It's as simple as that. For instance, there is no template for lit on the dashboard, however you can run the installation command to set up your lit project, same with Vite, but most likely the frameworks in Vite are available on the dashboard. Okay, moving on, let's explore the Nix Package Manager. For that, let's create a new workspace from a framework and continue from there. If you're wondering how to exit the workspace to your dashboard, don't worry, I also did. Go over to the IDX menu on the sidebar. We'll cover this section in a bit. Notice that here on the backend ports, we have one active port, the process ID, and the URL to our running app. You can copy the link or open it directly in the browser from this section. On the top, you'll find the navbar with some links. To navigate to your dashboard, you can simply click here to go to the support forum and ask the community how to exit the workspace, and the response you'll get is to click the home on the navbar. Alright, back on the dashboard, let's create an Astro project from one of the templates. Now that the workspace has been created, the terminal will automatically launch to configure the workspace and manage all the dependencies required for this environment to work. So as you just saw, I didn't have to configure this environment manually, but rather Nix configured the workspace to ensure that the environment is set for development. Now let's take a look into the config file. The Nix config file is really just a large but not very large object containing properties and values. However, the syntax is slightly different from the usual JS object. The syntax is rather similar to Lambda functions in Kotlin. In this configuration, you can see we have the channel property, which specifies the channel in which the packages are imported. There's also the packages property, which, you might have guessed it, lists all the packages installed in the project. In this case, only Node is installed. There's also the env property, which is used to define environment variables for the workspace. And finally, the IDX config. Installed extensions in your workspace will be displayed here. Commands to be executed when the workspace is newly created are here in this onCreate expression. If you remember, when this workspace was created, the terminal was launched to run some commands automatically. This onCreate expression was the reason, and the command it executed was this install command to install all the project's dependencies, and also this command to install Tailwind. This yes over here is going to be used as your answer for any yes or no option during the command execution. A typical case, for instance, could be, do you want to install ESLint? And lastly, we have the configuration for the preview section. You can set the value to false if you don't want previews. Okay, you might be wondering, what other package channels are there, and how can I switch the package channel? For that, let's go to the official Nix website. I'll leave a link below in the description for you to check it out along with any other relevant resources. We're not going to waste time going through the entire website. Once you're on the website, click this search icon. We'll be redirect us to the packages page where we can search and install packages. Here you can see the other package channels available, but I recommend you stick with the default stable channel. To include a package, simply search the name, and when you find it, add it to your list of packages in the Nix configuration file. There are lots of packages available to install. All you need to do is search and update your packages list. Back to the Nix configuration file. I already talked about the onCreate expression. However, there's another important expression that is not here, and that's the onStart expression. In here, we can set up a task and specify a command to be ran when the task is executed. In this case, we want the dev command to be automatically executed when we start the workspace, and by start I mean every time we close and reopen the workspace. For this to take effect, we need to rebuild the environment by clicking this button. This button will show every time we make changes to the configuration. But before we rebuild the environment, Notice that here on the backend ports, there's no active port, indicating that the app is not running. This is just a preview. Now, let's rebuild the environment, and notice what happens when the workspace is restarted. The task got executed, which will automatically run the command we specified. Now, if we go to the backend ports, you'll see that now there's one active port, which indicates that the app is running on that port number. We can visit the URL to see the app. Alright, now with the onStart configured to run the app every time, we won't need the preview again, so to disable preview, simple set this value to false and rebuild the workspace. Okay, now we don't have any preview of the app, but if we check the terminal, we can see that the app is running, just as we wanted. The layout of this configuration file is the same for every other workspace you create. Here is a side-by-side view of the Nix configuration files for 3 different workspaces. Same layout, different configuration contents. One of the core features of Nix that makes it incredible is that you can configure your workspace to use different versions of the same package. But that raises concern in areas such as bundle size, but that's another topic for another time, so make sure you stick around. Project IDX also comes with full support for Android development. Here is a sample configured workspace for Android development using Flutter. And of course it comes with an integrated Android emulator. There are some good stuff here, but we're not going to go into details. If there's something specific you'd like to find out, let me know in the comments. Alright, let's move on. Another exciting feature is that IDX comes with Gemini integration, and I don't think I need to tell you the benefits of having an AI assistant in your project, apart from spying on you. You can start a chat with Gemini right from your workspace by clicking any of the Gemini buttons on the workspace. In this blank workspace that I just created, I'm going to ask Gemini to build a simple counter app. You can then copy the response, or directly insert into your workspace. Without running it, you can tell that this is actually valid. After all, it's just a basic counter app. Another use case is that you can select a block of code and ask Gemini to explain what the selected code does. And the response will be a detailed explanation of what the code does. I'm going to try another example in the Astro workspace. Okay, I'll insert the generated code in a script up here. And since I forgot to specify TypeScript as the language in my prompt, I have to manually specify the types. Now let's run the app to see if it works. Alright, it works. We can see the results from the API have been logged in the console, and if we scroll a bit down the page, we can also see the list items we appended to the body. Awesome. There are lots you can accomplish with the AI integration, not only code generation and IntelliSense, but also in multi-cloud deployments and a lot more. Of course, being a Google product, Project IDX integrates beautifully with other Google services like Firebase and Google Cloud. This integration simplifies backend development and data management. Let's see a quick example of using the Firebase integration to host a simple app. For that, I'll quickly create a project on Firebase and also create a project in IDX. While we wait for the workspace to be configured, let's finish setting up the Firebase project. Okay, the workspace has been configured. Let's host this web app using the IDX Firebase integration. We'll first need to authenticate Firebase in the project. Now that we've authenticated Firebase, we can now initialize hosting in the app. This is where the Firebase project we created comes in. After a couple of steps, hosting has been initialized in the app, and we can deploy to production right away. Congratulations, you've successfully deployed your app using Firebase hosting. Here's your website URL.
Yep.
To facilitate code collaborations like paired programming and testing, Project IDX lets you share your workspace with anyone who has a Google account. To share your workspace, click the More Options icon next to the workspace and select Share. Now, add the person to your workspace by typing the email address of the person and clicking the Share button. You can now copy and share a restricted read-only access to the workspace, or allow read and write access to the workspace using the respective link. One of the downsides I noticed while using IDX was that there's a bit of latency in code IntelliSense. Compared to VSCode, code IntelliSense seems to appear almost instantly, even as you type the first character. But over here, I noticed a slight delay, which makes me feel like I typed too fast, and sometimes makes me want to take a coffee break while I wait for IntelliSense to complete my H1 tag. Another major downside is that a stable internet connection is required if you want to have a great experience with IDX. Of course, that's what you should expect from a cloud-based IDE. However, if you think you can't rely on your internet connection, then it's best you stick with VSCode. And finally, there's a limit to the number of workspaces you can create. In the current beta version, there's a limit of 5 total workspaces. If you want to create more workspaces, then the solution is to create more Gmail accounts to sign up. But as an OG dev, I submitted a post in the IDX forum about this issue, and hopefully, I'll get a response and a possible limit increase soon. I'll keep you guys updated on how it goes. Overall, I think that Project IDX offers a powerful, flexible, and collaborative environment for developers. While it has a few drawbacks, the benefits even in its current beta state far outweigh them, especially for those already embedded in the Google ecosystem. However, in its current state, I wouldn't recommend using it for large enterprise projects. Maybe some personal and side projects will do, just to get a feel of the environment. I encourage you to give it a try and see how it fits into your workflow. Besides, it's the same people behind VSCode, so why not give it a try? Okay, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and, oh, I said I wouldn't say any of that, didn't I? Alright then, I'll see you next time with another awesome video.